Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Secret Origins of Mint Condition. And this is our little experiment episode. If you're
That it is.
hopefully you're seeing this, we're on camera, people. So if you remember us from the store or haven't seen us in a while, here we are. This is going to be like a little quick episode just to try things out. We're going to call this Joe's Show and Tell because if you follow us on Instagram or Facebook, I've been posting some of Joe's classic comics that he has. He has an amazing collection. So I thought to use the medium to its fullest, we would take a look at some of what Joe's got in his comics collection for us today. So Joe, what did you bring for Show and Tell?
Well, first, James, thank you for the opportunity. This is you're the progenitor of this podcast, and you keep coming up with these great ideas. So this is another one. I just hope that the technology and my acumen with the technology holds true. So I do have something. I have the very first. I think there's two books here. I'm not sure which one was the first one I purchased as a child, but I'm holding up Superman number 189.
Ooh, look at that.
Okay, is there any glare on that, James? That's a little bit I can see on my screen.
It's a little bit, but it looks it's good. You got it protected, Joe. So it's protected.
Well, this is the original copy. I have a copy that I replaced this with, but this copy was purchased. This is the first. I believe the first ever copy of a Superman of a comic book that I ever purchased back in the spring of 1966. I probably just turned 11. Yeah. So, and I think I said this before. You'll notice this is a Curt Swan cover inked by the great George Klein, and there's Krypto on the cover, and Superman returns to Krypton. It's not an imaginary story.
Wow.
So when I first picked this book up, my knowledge of Superman was only with the TV show. And this blew me away because, oh my God, this Krypton, I thought that got blown up in the first episode. And now we're going back. So that was the key. That was the draw that got me in. And the very next day, I went back to the comic book store. And the Flash just hit the floor. Okay, I'll have to pick him up later. And I want to show that. And I went back to the comic book store the next day, and I found this.
Oh, look at that.
This is Batman number 1. I can't see the 183. Yeah, 183. And either I purchased this or the Superman book. I think I purchased the Superman book on, say, Wednesday, and this the next day. And as you can see, it's an homage to the Batman TV show that was going on at the time.
Wow.
And Batman's lounging around the Batcave, doesn't want to go out and fight crime. And Robin's going, what the hell's the matter with you, Batman? We got to get out there. And there's a telltale clue why this guy isn't the real Batman. And there it is right there. No oval around the bat signal.
So with these two books, because you're watching the shows,
Yes.
is this the first time you picked up the comics, or or these two books like the first time you realized there was a comic?
Good question. I knew there were comic books. I had seen them in drugstores and candy stores and magazine stores and card stores, but I never had the inclination to go pick one up. And my parents never purchased me one, or anybody else in the family. But I was a fan of the Superman TV show, George Reeves, for years. And then when Batman Adam West came on in January 1966, I think that codified for me. And shortly after that, I returned to I was in the candy store one day, probably getting an egg cream for like 15 cents. And you know what? I think I'm going to buy that comic book over there, that Superman comic or that Batman comic book. And that's it. The rest is history.
So their unintended consequence. Well, who knows if they were trying to sell comic books back at that time? Because Lord knows with their current movies and stuff, they don't always focus on the comic books. But the TV shows work, Joe. They got you to buy books.
They did. I mean, there was only two at the time. There was the reruns of the classic George Reeves show from the 50s and the current Batman Adam West TV show. And then the following fall, it exploded on TV with cartoons. Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, New Adventures of Superman, Superboy, and all the Hanna-Barbera stuff. That was, like a Birdman and Space Ghost and all that other stuff. So, incredible amount of cartoons. That Batman book, I'll hold it up again. This particular book is August 8, 1966. We have an upcoming podcast, folks, where I get to interview an old friend of mine, thanks to James for starting this podcast. Someone I worked with 40 years ago at Barnes & Noble who's been in the business for 40 years, Keith Williams. And throughout our conversation, I asked Keith what was the first comic he purchased. And the first comic he purchased was Batman, number 184. So Keith's a couple of years younger than I. And so I just thought this was incredible when I said, Keith, I bought that book on probably the same day you did back in 66. So Those two books, Superman and Batman, in some order, either Superman or Batman, are the first two comic books I ever purchased. And as I said, the rest is history.
Yeah, that's amazing. I like on that last cover you showed.
With the web?
Yeah, they got the red phone like from the TV shows.
TV show, yeah. Yes, the TV show started having a definite influence on these comic books, these Batman comic books. And by 1968, things were getting a little out of hand with the goofiness and the campiness of the comics. And then, thank God, the show was canceled. I wish it would stayed on the air much longer. But thank God, Neal Adams and Denny O'Neil came to the fore in 1969, and saved Batman and maybe saved comic books, or at least DC. So
was the campiness of the TV show influenced the campiness in the comic, or was the comic already going campy by the time they made the TV show?
No, the comic in 1964, the New Look Batman was introduced under the auspices of Julie Schwartz to get away from the ridiculous Batman Silver Age monster and mad scientist and alien worlds that was in the 50s and early 60s. But the TV show comes along shortly after that, and it drives the sales of the comic books through the roof. It really does. But but the campiness encroached upon Julie's quote-unquote new look, more realistic look of Batman and Robin as being detectives. And they had to, I guess they had to walk a tightrope for the next couple of years with that in the books. But then, as I said, by the late 60s, people like Al Neal and Adams, Bob Brown, Irv Novick, Frank Robbins brought the Dark Knight back. Yeah. And we're very grateful for that.
So it seems like with Julie Schwartz, though, they tried to come out of the that sort of goofiness, but then they ended up married to it because the show was doing so well.
Yeah, and they were selling more comic books, so why not make the books goofier to look like the TV show, right?
Well, that's a good point, though, Joe. I mean, I think because I listened to some people online and stuff like that. I think some people I don't know how you feel about it, because obviously you had the store during this time period, but some people were like, they make the characters reflect the movies. Like, eventually Wolverine at some point started looking more and more like Hugh Jackman. He grew the extra foot, and he started looking more like Hugh Jackman. But they've done this before. I mean, you just mentioned that it's nothing new when you have a successful property in the movies or TV to make the comics reflect it.
Right, you want to sell more comic books. It's at 12 cents a pop. They had to sell a lot of them. That's a good. You realize that. I've got a few more. I'm gonna go now to a book that I've shown before, and you know this book, James. I'm going to read my little note here. In my humble opinion, the single greatest cover in the history of the entire medium. If you had a pulse, you had to snatch this off the rack and race home to read it. From the spring of 1966, a true masterpiece of the art form.
Yes. So that's our legendary book.
And James recreated this cover for me, and I still haven't gotten it framed yet, so I got to do that. And once I do, I'm going to show it. But this, to me, is what comic books are all about. And when I saw this in the spring of '66, how could a kid who just turned 11 not buy this comic book? Oh my God! Look at the terrible condition, the terrible predicament that the hero is in. I had no idea who the guy on the sled was, but I knew who Spider-Man was. So yeah, Spider-Man number 39, the first issue after the Ditko era ends. So this is the first John Romita Sr., along with Stan Lee writing. Classic in every sense of the word. Beautiful comic book. The inks were by his, I believe, I want to say Mike Esposito, but I should have checked that before. But there it is, folks. In my opinion, the greatest comic book cover. How's that coming in, James?
It's coming in great, but I guess like in Romita, John Romita, I'll just call him John Romita, right? Senior. Yes. I want to say like he sort of like set the bar so high for himself when he started. Like, what's a cover? Like, has he ever, like, in your mind, has he like surpassed that cover ever with his work?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I thought of showing that one today, but I held off because I wanted to. I didn't want to show two Spider-Man covers. But if anyone's familiar with Spider-Man 50. Volume 1, number 50, where he's walking away. The
classic Spider-Man No More.
Spider-Man No More. And there's that full page in the middle of the book where he's walking down the alleyway and the costume's in the trash can. which is
Yes.
a scene they used in Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire, right? Yes.
Yes, and possibly recreate it at some point in the Tom Holland. It seems like an image that's been used a lot.
It was used during the return of Barry Allen, as a matter of fact.
Oh,
So
right, that's right.
those of you that haven't heard that episode, check that out on our podcast that Keith and I did. We talk about that. It's an homage that many artists have tried to emulate to varying degrees of success.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Sam Raimi didn't go for recreating that cover you just showed in the original Spider-Man.
Yeah, at some point, yeah, he could have been walking off into the sunset down Fifth Avenue or something like that, or it would be up Fifth Avenue. Well, no, that wouldn't work because he'd have to be walking up one of the side streets. Yeah, I guess. I don't know, the way the grid works in Manhattan. But moving on, I got to get the Fantastic Four in, right? So from the summer of 1968, the first appearance of Annihilus and the birth of Reed and Sue's firstborn, Franklin. 48 pages of Kirby and Sinnott madness. What knucklehead would pass this up? And here it is, Fantastic Four, annual number 4, 25 cents.
Wow.
So this meant the day when Joe went to the comic book store that day, he could only buy one comic book. He couldn't get two and a bazooka bubble gun. But that's what, but at this, wow, when I read this, I was blown away. This is like, this was not my first Fantastic Four comic, but it was my first annual, FF annual. And at the time, DC was doing annuals, but they were all reprints. Marvel was doing new stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe they throw a reprint in the back, but this is 48 pages. And this gorgeous comic book just blew me away. There's a MacGuffin. They have to get something out of the negative zone to get it back to Earth to save Sue and the baby before the birth. So, and of course, Annihilus is in the way. And who's going to stop these three guys? No.
Now, well, when that book came out, though, Joe, what number were they in the regular run?
Oh, they must have been about, I should have anticipated that question, James. I'm sorry I didn't, but I would say they were probably in the 60s at that point.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's pretty bold to have in the 60s to have Franklin born. I think of Franklin as more of a modern day invention, but it seems like they had Franklin for a long time.
Well, 3 years earlier, the FF got married in annual number 3. So unlike, this is an interesting story, I picked this up as a kid too. Obviously there was enough time. More than enough time, right?
Yeah.
Passing in the real world. I remember when Aquaman married Mira, about 5 issues later, the baby was born. The only thing that saves them there is that those were bi-monthly. So otherwise, it's the 60s. What were Aquaman and Mira doing before they were officially married by the priests of Atlantis? So, we're not going to get into that now. But
I just also find it interesting that, you have the Fantastic Four and then you introduce a kid. It's sort of already breaking up the dynamic of four. It's interesting that they're already playing with that model at 60 issues in.
Oh, they were playing with it even before that by aiding Johnny's college friend Wyatt Wingfoot as an official member. Yeah. Very soon after this, right after this, Sue is recovering from the giving birth, and Medusa comes along, former villain from the Frightful Four, Inhuman, and she takes Sue's place in the Fantastic Four. So yeah, Stan and Jack were playing with the formula, and it worked. They knew what they were doing. They were giving the fans, what they wanted, but at the same time, they were throwing a little spiciness here and there to keep the thing, fresh.
Yeah, I mean, they have almost as many Fantastic Four members as Avenger members.
Yes. You know what? Okay, now, mentioned Jack Kirby, right? So, purchased this book in December of 1970 and got it signed by the King at the 1971 New York Comic Con over the 4th of July weekend. I was literally speechless when I met Jack Kirby. And there it is, folks. Forever People #1.
Wow.
Yeah, it says right here, signed by Kirby. It's on the inside. I'm not taking out the plastic. But it is signed by Kirby. And it was, I don't know if you're familiar with the Honeymooners, but there's that episode where Ralph goes, humming, Ed Norton. Well, that was me in front of the table that day. And all I did was extend my hand, and somehow I said, it's a pleasure and honor to meet you. And he said, the pleasure's all mine, young man. And I said, could you please sign my copy for people? He said, I'd be very happy to do that, young man. And it was like meeting, royalty, meeting Jack Kirby in 1971. And obviously this book was the first intro of his 4th World Series when he left Marvel and came to DC. Not his first work at DC. That was a Jimmy Olsen book. Jimmy Olsen 133, I believe. This followed shortly thereafter. So this is a great comic. It didn't last too long, as did any of his Fourth World stuff initially, but that's for another podcast. So,
I mean, that's where we get Darkseid from.
yes, Darkseid. Well, Darkseid made his first appearance, I think, in the back of Jimmy Olsen 133 or 134, in one little panel. Kind of like the way Wolverine was in one panel at the end of Hulk 180 and then full blown in 181. So first appearances can be deceiving sometimes. Where they were. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wow.
All right, so we're going to stay in the early 70s, and we come to a book, another one of I think one of the 10 greatest covers of all time, but for a different reason. One of the most influential covers in comic book history. Comics had become relevant. They had grown up. This was a shocker in the early summer of 1971. Notice the drug paraphernalia on the front table in front of Speedy, and there it is.
Yes.
Yeah, my water's a junkie. Can you see with the...
Yeah. It was like not comic code approved, right?
No, it is. It is.
Approved. It is.
Yes,
wow.
It's not like the Spider-Man drug stories. They got this approved. They sent this out, and they told the comic store what they were doing. There's even a letter in here from the Honorable Mayor of New York, Mayor Lindsay, who changed parties more times than you change his socks. But, this had the approval right there.
Wow.
And it is a groundbreaking comic book, to say the least.
From a groundbreaking series. For a
groundbreaking series, right. They were pulling no punches in this series. And this, of course, is a Neal Adams cover, inked by, it's got to be, it's definitely Dick Giordano. I can see in the face. I don't think anybody else inked Neal Adams in the early days, but Dick Giordano. So a very classic comic book and a classic moment in comic book history.
Absolutely.
Just, and showing that we have this now in comic books where they're trying to be relevant and the world outside your door, as Stan said. But unfortunately, I think the creators today don't have the chops that these guys had, because while they're getting their anti-drug message across, they're still telling an exciting adventure story.
Yeah.
And you got to do both. You can't have a PSA. You got to give me a story to go along with it. It'll last. It'll stay. Right. And I think that's the way these guys hit it off. My next book is a plug for an upcoming. No, it's already on. It's episode 149. It's Joe's Comic Corner with Joe. I'm Reggie Jackson again, using my name in the third person. God help me. Where myself and my good buddy Keith Tarnowski talk about probably one of the first really big reboots right after the Crisis. Man of Steel #1 by John Byrne. Now, this is the cover. This was the newsstand cover, but I'm sorry. I picked up that's a newsstand cover. Okay. But here is the direct marketing cover. This is a little rare. A little more rare than that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And, this book obviously dispatched or changed almost 50 years of continuity of the Superman legend. And John Byrne was at the height of his powers, I think, when he was doing this. And I think this led to a renaissance for Superman, this book. As you can see, there's the Green Death in Krypton. We talked about that in the podcast, so go check it out, folks. But this birthed an era of Superman for the next 10 years that I think is the best era of Superman in his entire illustrious 85-year history.
Yeah, and what they still pull from for...
Excuse me?
And that's what they still pull from.
Yes, they pull from this. They also pull from the origin that we'll be doing soon, Keith and I, Superman Birthright by Mark Waid. And they also pull from Jeff Johns' Superman Secret Origin. So when you put those three together, you get the total origin of Superman. Now we're going to jump back a few years back to the 60s. And, I showed a Fantastic Four comic, but the first appearance of the Vision, 1960s AI come to life in the summer of 1968. What a great cover by the great John Buscema. I almost said Sal. That was his brother. The interior is written by Roy Thomas, the story, and the interior is by John Buscema, inked by George Klein, who just come over from D.C. Klein was Curt Swan's inker on Superman for many years. Then he had a short period where he worked over at Marvel, mostly on the Avenger books. And obviously, this is a classic. This is not the first robot in comic book history, obviously. We had robot heroes in the 1940s and 50s. But this is the first robot android character that supposedly had no human emotions, but apparently had more than the average Avenger.
Yes, he did.
Right?
He had a lot. He had a lot.
a lot of emotions. Great comic book. Great, and just I think this would go in the top 20 greatest comic book covers of all time.
Yes, that's very iconic. Yeah,
Very iconic.
It always pops up.
Okay, we have 2 more Marvels to go, and both of these are for Arco. So the next one, a landmark issue. For many reasons, first appearance of the Hellfire Club, first Emma Frost, first Kitty Pryde, and the beginning of the Dark Phoenix saga. Soon to be a podcast entry by James, myself, and Arco on our podcast, Make Conditions. There it is, X-Men number 129. I had forgotten, and we spoke about this on the podcast, James, right? That so many firsts were in this book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
a first appearance galore in that issue.
I mean, there are other members of the Hellfire Club who escaped me their names, but that's their first appearance too, because it's a Hellfire Club. It's more than one person. But, Sebastian Shaw, is that the right?
Sebastian Shaw, yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Like I said, Dazzler, Kitty Pryde, and...
Emma Frost.
Emma Frost, and being the kickoff of the Dark Phoenix saga.
Yeah. So there you go. That's a great, and only 40 cents back in the day.
Not bad.
And John Byrne, of course, on the art, and the great Chris Claremont on the story. Fantastic book. And then, this is really for Arco. Finally, the Knucklehead gets his own miniseries by Claremont and Miller and Rubinstein in the summer of 1982. If he beckons you to come, and you don't, you're going to wind up being beside yourself.
Yeah, look at that.
It's a great cover.
That is a great cover.
I love this cover. It's Frank Miller before he went nuts and was doing great stuff back in the day. And this is just a 4-issue miniseries, I believe, right? Yes.
Yeah. The classic.
I told you offline yesterday I was at my first comic book convention this weekend with Keith. Small one out here on Long Island. And we saw Eric Walker, who's a dealer now, and he had this book slabbed, and it looked great.
Wow.
And, I believe he sold it when I went back to see him later on that afternoon. So it's just, wow. What a great cover.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So that's what I have today. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to be out of frame for a second so I can pick up the flash, okay?
Okay, no problem.
Live broadcast. Okay. Back in the day, we had live TV where things went awry, and now we have live podcasts. So first I want to show this little guy. The only bobblehead I have. And Keith gave me this on Sunday. This is the only Funko Pop Wally West classic costume from the 90s, the era of Mark Waid that was produced. And Keith knew I had to have it. And he got one, and he got me one. So thanks, Keith. I love it. He's got a place on my high boy here, or the buffet table in the dining room. And he's standing right next to this guy. The only bobblehead I have. CC Sabathia. And Chris got me this. So thanks, Chris, if you're watching. Stacy. Now, CC's shaking his head in disgust because he just saw last night's Yankee game, and he's been watching what's been going on with the Yankees all year. But CC was a great pitcher for the Yankees for a decade. Led them to a World Series in 2009, their last. And this is CC the Jedi Knight, right? Yes.
Yeah, it looks like a Jedi. I was going to say, he's wearing a robe and a...
He's wearing a robe. It's great. Man, you got to love CC. He's one of the great Yankees of all time. So I thought, some comics, and maybe throw in a couple of little action figure or these little toys here. I thought, to top it off.
Well, that sounds great, Joe. That was fantastic.
Yeah, I think I had a good time. I want to do this again.
Well, I'll throw something here. I got
cool.
something about it, so I'll do a little show and tell since you ended with that. This is I put this on the Facebook group and then the Instagram, but this is the McFarlane Batman Hush figure, which I think is like the definitive Batman figure I've ever seen. Like
he's articulated, right?
He's articulated, and he looks just like Jim Lee's art come to life. And
really, the big bat emblem, yes.
Yeah, and he's it's and I don't even I know he re-released this figure recently in the black and gray, but I kind of like the blue and gray. It looks like Jim Lee's art. So
one question about that figure: are there ridges on the boots at the bottom of the boots like he drew in the comic books?
Let's take a look. No, they're flat. They're flat. I think
Yeah, well, okay.
It's still a great figure, though.
It's a great figure. It's a fantastic figure. Wow.
It's really cool. Looks like, Jim Lee is, I don't know, Jim Lee's, there are lots of great Batman artists, but Jim Lee's Batman is always a fantastic.
Did you get that at Mint?
No, this came out recently. This is from McFarlane's, he's got the DC multiverse, so I think he put this figure out last year.
Wow.
And I don't really collect that much stuff anymore, but when I saw it, I was like, I got to pre-order that.
You're a Batman guy. You got to have it.
It disappeared. I mean, I don't have it nearby, but he made a Swamp Thing the year prior that stands like this is like 2 feet above Batman, so it's very impressive too. Fantastic. So I'll have to put that in one of our next show and tell. So Joe, you like this?
I like this a lot, and I want to get everybody involved. We got to get Richie, we got to get Kranjak, we got to get Arco, we got to get Keith on here too, because Keith's got some cool stuff. And I'm sure Chris does. So this setup that we have, can we add more people? Can we do?
We could try. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Audience, if you like this little video version of the podcast, this little show and tell episode, let us know in the comments section. I'm not sure where this will live ultimately, either on our YouTube page or on our Facebook page, but let us know if you enjoyed this. We enjoyed doing it. If you're seeing this, it means the editing went well, and if you're not seeing it, you're not going to know anyway. So
you'll really know what you missed.
So Joe, thank you for agreeing to do this and for picking out some prime pop culture items for our first video episode.
Oh, this is a pleasure, James. Thanks for suggesting this. This is great. I like that we're doing this. We're opening up the podcast. Hopefully we'll get more people to subscribe. And James will tell you all about that because I always scoof it up. But if you like our stuff, please come to our podcast.
Yes, if you're watching this, however we're doing it, it'll probably land on YouTube. So like the YouTube channel. If you like the video, if you happen to find us new, we have over 150 episodes of the podcast, which are easy to find. The Secret Origins of Mint Condition. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple. It's on a few other ones. And if you're just on YouTube, we will periodically be updating that, so you can follow the channel as well. We'd appreciate that. So once again, thank you, Joe.
You're welcome again.
Thank you, viewers, and we'll talk to you on the next episode or on the next video.
There you go.